This video will demonstrate matching and mixing color for screen printing. I'll be using the uncoded Pantone swatch book to guide me in the ink mixing process. I won't be using the recipes provided in that swatch because we do not have Pantone colors, but they can help guide you in choosing which colors to use. If you are using the Pantone guide in Photoshop or Illustrator, just know those colors will appear significantly different in the Pantone swatch book. When mixing your inks, you're going to always want to start with your lightest color and mix the darkest colors into it to create your desired hue. As you can see here, if you're desiring a light sky blue, start with white and slowly add your cyan. Now, if you just want a slightly lighter cyan color, you may start with that as your base and then slowly add your white. Working this way will help you mix your inks efficiently and will allow for little to no ink waste. Here's another example. So if you're trying to mix, say, a bright green, start with yellow and slowly add your cyan. Continue adding cyan until you achieve the vibrant green you want. Now, if you just want to green up your cyan color, you can then begin adding yellow a little bit at a time. So as you can see here, I'm using my Pantone swatch book and I'm optically matching the colors on my computer screen. It's important that you do so because it's a lot easier to mix from a printed color than to mix from what you see on your screen. Your screen has millions of colors, where a Pantone guide limits it to what you can actually achieve with our acrylic ink. The Pantone guide works best when you have Pantone inks. We do not use Pantone inks in here, but we have a number of colors that can substitute. So much of the mixing will come through comparing our mixture with the Pantone swatch. This takes a bit of practice, but it's important that you pay close attention to the hue, value, and saturation of your color to get an accurate match. I'm torn between these two colors right here, but I believe the second one matches the best. Once you've found your colors, go ahead and write down the Pantone number, which is the PMS number, Pantone Matching System. So once I have my 4 colors, I'm writing them down and keeping track of them as I go. Once I have all my colors selected, I could move on towards mixing. So when you're mixing your colors, it's important to stay organized and keep your area clean. So first thing I do is gather all my materials before I begin. That includes collecting all the inks I think I'm going to use, gathering cups, your inking knife, extra paper for testing color, and your mixing cups. Lastly, have a sponge handy that's wet so that you can clean as you work. Starting with your first cup, mix a little bit of ink at a time. So as you can see here, I barely filled a cup to start mixing my light magenta. I'm starting out with a transparent base here as I want a light color. I don't want to start off with white yet because white is really opaque and is going to desaturate my magenta a little too much, and I want to preserve my bright hue. Then I'm going to slowly mix in my magenta till I'm happy. So as you can see here, I barely used a teaspoon of my ink. Once I need to check it, I do a drawdown, so it allows me to see the ink, what it's going to look like on paper. I'll continue mixing until I get the color right. So I felt like I needed to add a little bit of white to lighten up my color just a bit without affecting its saturation. So I mix it in, and then what I'm going to do is take another pool, which we call as a drawdown, and as you can see here, it is much lighter. You want to be sure to pull your drawdown or the preview of your ink on the color paper you are using. I try to use the exact same paper, like a scrap of it, to preview this color. I'll go ahead and mix it. And then once I'm finished, I can put away any of the inks I don't need and clean up my area in preparation for the next color. My next color is actually going to be this rusted red. So I start off with fire red. I'm going to add a warm red and then a little bit of black to desaturate my color. I make sure I have the Pantone guide handy, and here I actually have the same colors that the recipe asks for, which is quite helpful when selecting the colors to mix. So I'm going to add a black here to dirty up the color and desaturate it just a little bit. As you can see, I just put a tiny bit in because the black will quickly change the color the more I add. So again, start small with these dark colors and add just a teeny bit at a time until you get used to mixing. Anytime you want to preview your color, remember just take a little bit of ink on your fingertip and work it on top of the paper to simulate the screen printing process. I realized that it got a little too orange here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more red back to my batch. This color can easily go to orange, so again, I want to pull it back, checking it, starting to appear more red as I work it, and I feel like it's pretty close. Remember to keep your station tidy and clean as you work. This includes your mixing knives. When you're done, be sure to wash them thoroughly so that you can mix new colors. Make sure your mixing knife is completely clean before dipping it into any of our ink supply. I'm going to add a little bit of white to this red here, just to brighten it up a bit. And I feel that that's very close to the Pantone I wanted to match. Once I'm done, I'm actually going to clean all of my materials because I've mixed all the warm colors for this print. I'm now going to proceed with the cool colors, my greens and blues. Before I do that, I want to put lids on my cups, so I wipe the edges really well so that my lids do not stick to the rim. Now I can set these cups aside. They're ready for the next step, printing. Lastly, write down your recipe. So I include the inks I used, how much of it I used. I usually say cups or parts, so I don't forget it if I need to mix again. Here's the recipe broken down into cups and teaspoons. You can see how little some of the blacks and whites are used in the recipe to retain the purity of the hue in the colors mixed. Now that I'm ready to mix my cool colors, I'm going to reset my station, including putting away any of my reds and cleaning all of my materials, including my tabletop. If you clean as you go, you have a lot less you'll have to do at the end of your mixing. I'll be using a cyan and a green base to mix my colors. I'm still working in translucent inks because I love seeing my layers overlap, but keeping in mind that my key layer, my final layer, should be a little more opaque so I can see all my detail. If you prefer to use opaque inks, that's totally fine here. Just keep in mind you won't need transparent base. Some colors are already opaque, like your whites and blacks, but the yellows and greens have a little bit of transparency to them, so keep that in mind. As you can see, I continue to match my swatch in the Pantone book and make adjustments as I work. I'm adding white here to lighten up my color. It's going to make it more opaque, so I will need to accommodate if I want to keep my color translucent. I've only used a little bit of white here, so it's not going to impact the translucency too much, but you can see it really makes a difference in the value. I'll continue making adjustments by adding a little bit more white until I feel that the color matches my Pantone swatch. And now on to my final color. This one's going to be easier as I'm going to just slightly modify this green out of the can. You can, of course, use ink straight from the can, but I highly recommend modifying the color to fit your needs for the image. I begin to add my cyan to this to pull it a little more towards a blue color. I'm trying to achieve a blue-green here. Once I've achieved my color, I write down my recipe, and then I can start putting everything away and cleaning up. Do your best to conserve ink by emptying out any measuring cups or getting any extra ink off of your measuring knives. After you're finished, keep all of your mixed inks together and write your name on them. They are yours. And now you can start to put your inks away and clean all of your tools you've used and the table surface. Once you've removed all the excess ink, you can take all of your knives and cups to the sink to be cleaned. Use water to wash down and then follow up with your general cleaner to clean up any leftover ink residue. In the sink, you'll use your garden hose to clean off your sponge and all your materials used. Once they're clean, do not leave them in the sink. Store them in their appropriate areas and make sure the sink is clear and draining appropriately. Make sure to clean your area and return all your materials back to their proper place.